Good evening and welcome to Current Issues. I'm your host, Hesham Tillawi. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have two guests. The first guest will be Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, retired Air Force. She's been on the show a couple of times before, and it is overdue, way overdue to have her back. We will be discussing many issues with her. She's an expert on the war. She's an expert on what's going on in the country from a libertarian perspective, of course. And in the second hour, we will have Dr. Kevin Barrett, another libertarian who is running for Congress in the 3rd District of Wisconsin, or in Wisconsin. We will be speaking with him at 30 minutes from now. We will have Dr. Kevin Barrett, but in the first hour we will have Dr. Karen Kwiatkowski. We are going to discuss where do we go from here and what does the war mean for each one of us, plus many issues that she is an expert with. Dr. Kwiatkowski, she was at the Pentagon, as a matter of fact, when the Bush administration decided to invade Iraq. We're not going to go in details because we did, in previous interviews, we did ask her in details what was going on at the Pentagon at that time. But this time we are just going briefly to go over a few things with her, but mainly we are going to speak with her about a last article she wrote, which has a lot to do with the economy. Before we go to her, though, you know, if you have been watching the circus in Denver, and that's what it is. Unfortunately, we don't have time tonight to talk about it. I have a lot to say about it, but I guess Barack Obama will be speaking here, and I will be discussing this with Dr. Kwiatkowski of what does she think about what is going on and what is happening. But before we go to Dr. Kwiatkowski, we're going to play a little clip. It's about 3 minutes clip. In the first part of that clip is Joe Biden speaking to Shalom TV and saying some interesting stuff that I guess it makes us wonder if these people are running for the president and vice president of Israel, or are they running for the presidency in the United States. And the second part of that clip is with Dr. Kwiatkowski, an interview which took place, I think, in 2004. It's only about 3 minutes for both of them. So let's go with the clip, and as soon as we come back, we will be joined with Dr. Karen Kwiatkowski.
When the Baker Commission filed its report saying peace in Israel is related to Iraq, you may, I was the first and only person in the Congress to point out, if tomorrow peace broke out in between Israelis and Palestinians, does anybody think there wouldn't be a full-blown war in Iraq? And conversely, if Iraq were transported to Mars, does anyone think there would not be the terrorism visited upon the Israelis every day? And so let's get it straight. Israel is not the cause of Iraq. Iraq being settled or not settled has nothing to do with Israel's conduct. The second part is people should understand by now, that should be crystal clear, that Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East. I always say to my friends when they say those things to you, I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed? Now, there's a rationale, in my view, why Pollard should be given leniency. There's a rationale for that. But there is not a rationale to say, no, what happened did not happen and should be pardoned. And my worry is that if we were to move, if I were president, to go and pardon Pollard, you didn't ask me that question, right, but to pardon Pollard would make a lie out of the notion that there are certain rules, period. You cannot give classified information, period, even to a friend. If this were Great Britain, it would be the same thing. There is this inextricable tie between culture, religion, ethnicity that most people don't fully understand, that is unique and, how can I say it, so strong with Jews worldwide. There is a, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
The choice is his. And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition and disarm him in the name of peace.
Out of the president's mouth, vice president's mouth, the same things that were being given to us to put into our superiors, our senior civilian leadership's mouths. These things were not based on intelligence that we saw, that everyone saw. They were based on a very selective reading of the intelligence and then a creative packaging such that you could push through these two big points that the president and the vice president and the whole neoconservative community used to justify this preemptive war on Iraq.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now joined, and pleased to say that I always enjoyed my conversations with Karen Kwiatkowski, and I guarantee you this will not be any different. It will be enjoyable, informative, and you will have a lot of knowledge after the interview. Dr. Kwiatkowski, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks so much for having me again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, much better.
Oh, okay, thank you very much for having me again on your show. It's always fun.
Excellent. Tell me, now, I don't want to go back. We've talked about 9/11. We talked about the war in Iraq, but there's something that Joe Biden on that little clip he mentioned that really, you know, Israel had nothing to do with the war. But I think you know better because you were at the Pentagon, and I'm not going to spend much time on this. This was not even in the as a segment that we're going to talk about. But he's lying when he says that Israel did not have anything to do with that because you were at the Pentagon and you saw the Israelis going in and out, and they had special privileges. And the Office of Special Planning, which Douglas Feith was over, was basically an extension of Sharon's office. Very briefly, what can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, whether it's Israel, the country, Israel, the people, AIPAC, the lobby, or Americans who were in the administration, and some of them still are, the neoconservatives who in particular identify with Israel, Israel cannot be separated from any of our activities in the Middle East, any of them. Not just this latest thing in Iraq, but all of the activities that we have in foreign policy in the Middle East are impacted, affected, influenced by, and we consult with the Israelis when we do these things. So it is pretty not true. It is not true what Biden is saying. But, you know, you can't do it. It's not like we can consult all of the people of Israel. We certainly don't. I think the Congress and politicians in this country, Biden, for example, is most sensitive to the very neoconservative pro-Israeli AIPAC lobby, which does not represent the country of Israel or even all of the government of Israel. So, you know, you do have to separate those things. So, and maybe in Joe Biden's mind, the Israeli people had nothing to do with it, but certainly AIPAC and certain American politicians, which identify very closely with the far right in Israeli politics. Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that, and the evidence is there, and it's not just on this latest adventure in Iraq. It's in our whole Middle East policy.
Yeah, Karen, help us understand why our leaders are actually their biggest race is not to win the presidency of the United States, but to actually to compete who's more Zionist than the other. Why is that?
Well, it is funny that they do try to compete. I think, and I've read this, and I can't come up with a better explanation. It's not so much that our members of Congress and our politicians love Israel; it is that they fear AIPAC. AIPAC, while it represents a small percentage of American Jews and a small percentage of Israeli interests even, AIPAC has proven itself historically able to get candidates elected and to get candidates or get sitting congressmen and senators diselected. They've shown that they can do it. They're willing to put their money where their mouth is. It is an important lobby. It's not the only important lobby, but it is an important lobby. And when it comes to getting elected, that's what these congressmen want. And they don't want to risk alienating or even worse, making an enemy of AIPAC. So I think it's AIPAC. It's American politics. It's kind of unfair to blame Israel when, in fact, this is a result of the way American politics worked.
Okay. Who do you think John McCain is going to pick for a running mate?
You know what? I think he wants to pick Lieberman.
Of course he does.
But I don't think he dares pick Lieberman. I think he wants to. I really don't know. I'm looking at the news now to see. They say it would be leaked out by tonight that it's
Minnesota governor.
Minnesota. Yeah.
Tim Pawlenty.
Nothing about him.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the last article you wrote. I mean, I always heard about the housing bubble. I heard about the stock market bubble, and now you are coming out with a term, the war bubble. Tell me about that.
Well, it actually is not my term, but I saw it mentioned in an article written on MarketWatch.com by a guy named Paul Farrell, and he's a business writer. And he was writing kind of a funny article, and in this article he used the term war bubble in the context of these other bubbles, and I got to thinking about, the nature of bubbles, and, they grow and they grow. They're filled with a lot of empty air, hot air. They eventually burst, and of course, pain happens for those people who've invested in those bubbles. And the idea that our war activity and the American economy that is very dependent on war is very much built around a bubble. It very much has the characteristics of a bubble. A lot of made-up stuff, okay? Enemies that don't exist, WMD in Iraq that doesn't exist, events that don't concern us that we are told, oh, these events do concern us. For example, what Georgia and Russia are doing over South Ossetia. These kinds of things we're told, oh, this is what you want to invest in. But in fact, of course, the information is not true. It is not in our interest to do it. It's not very substantial. There's a lot of hype. And we put our military money, our tax money, borrowed money from the Chinese, we put all this money into this investment in war. And like all the other bubbles, it's destined to collapse, and I think it's already collapsing. Now, that's an optimistic view, and that article was somewhat optimistic, saying that it would collapse and collapse soon. It's hard to say if it'll collapse soon. The other thing that this war bubble idea relates to is, of course, what anyone who's ever studied empires knows. What is it that destroys empires? It's overextension, it's militarism, it's government spending, it's when the governments go bankrupt. The empires go bankrupt, and they collapse. They collapse really from within. They fritter away at the edges, and they collapse from within. And again, the war bubble is what's going to do that to our empire. At least so I think.
Now, is the bubble bursting now? Because, I mean, things, if they get any worse than what they are now economically, which I'm sure, they will be if we continue on this road, how bad is it going to be?
Well, I think most Americans don't really understand and aren't really aware of how deeply indebted this country is, and how much deficit spending that we're doing, even for things that we consider our basic services, domestic spending that we think, oh, well, we can afford that. We can't afford anything that our federal government is doing. This country cannot afford any of it. We can't afford it today. We will definitely not be able to afford it tomorrow as the folks, the baby boomers, are already beginning to retire. We elect different presidents. We have a society that expects really socialistic type services. Certainly we've paid into these systems. We want that money back. Well, there's no money for any of that. And the war, increasingly, I say the war, not just our occupations abroad, but our complete national investment in military and security type issues, a huge sector of our economy. Of course, none of it's not necessary to the extent that we're doing it. It's not affordable. It's not productive. We're buying things that we intend to destroy so that we can then buy more. Okay, this is not something you want to make your economy on, and that's what our economy is. And we can't afford it. And where do we get the money now? Well, we borrow it from other countries. But will that continue? I read an interesting article today relating to the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac failures. And, of course, Americans and around the world are aware that these government-backed debt, quasi-private public industries have really, they don't have any, 95% of their assets are gone. They don't have money to meet their, those that bought their stock. Well, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, the bulk of their shareholders are not American people. It's Chinese and other foreign investors. Well, they want their money. If these guys are not going to throw good money after bad. So, yeah, there's a good sign that our economy, and to the extent that our economy is based on unproductive things like war and security industries, which are just, feed off fear, and fear in many ways is fantasy in a lot of these cases, as we find out after it's too late. There won't be money for this. These industries will collapse. And if they don't collapse, what will happen is they'll have to increase taxes and reduce the promises or reduce the socialistic type things that we expect our government to provide for us in this country. And either one of those things, whether it's raising taxes or reducing government benefits that we expect to get, are going to make people very angry. And they will demand that money for war ceases and gets put into their pockets, either in terms of maintaining taxes at the current rate, not increasing them, or funding these entitlement promises that the government has given its own citizens. So I think the war bubble has to burst. Now, historically, it always does. So there's no doubt that it will burst. The question is how quickly. I think it's going to be more quickly than later. And I think a big part of that is because the people that are funding it now can easily say, they're not Americans, they're not taxpayers. Taxpayers are not funding it, really. The funders come from overseas, and they do this by choice, and they don't have to choose to give the American government money. They don't have to buy American debt.
Okay.
And when they cease buying American debt, there is nothing else left to draw on.
Okay.
It's not like we're a rich, wealthy country. We like to think we are. But in terms of how we invest
Karen.
in war, we borrow so much. Anyway, I think that's the concern.
Okay. Have you been following the Democratic Convention in Denver?
I actually have not been. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're missing a great circus.
I haven't watched any of the speeches, no.
Yeah, you're missing a great circus there. Very well, yes, very well planned and brilliantly choreographed. Because everything in there, it's like I noticed that Obama he showed up for like 5 minutes at the end last night, and he looked more white or whiter to me. And they came up with a great uncle of his who fought in World War II, who was an old white American. Are they really concerned? And then at the end, Joe Biden's family flooded the stage, and you can see nothing but white people. So, those three there, I said, you know what? The Democrats are worried about this race thing because the whole convention is like, don't worry, white people. We are still here. Are they worried about the race thing, the race card?
Well, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are, and it's not just race as as an American problem. That we're not going to vote for a black person. I think a lot of Americans, and certainly those under 40, 45, would happily vote for a black person. They don't care. I think race is really more of an age thing in this country. But there's another aspect to Obama, which is not race, but it connects with race in a subconscious way, and that is this idea of the unknown. That's what they're trying to get rid of, I think. I don't think they're as worried about race as they are that he is a little different. It doesn't, he could be Asian, he could be, Norwegian, but he's a little different. And his difference has to, be African-Americanism, which is actually not different for us. And like I said, I think folks under 40 and 45 would have no problem at all voting for him. They wouldn't even resist it at all.
Do you think...
But it's the unknown, and he has done this to himself in some ways by not being specific about what he stands for. And he's also caved, I think, when he chose Joe Biden. I mean, clearly they are worried that people will not vote for change. partly because change is not defined. But yeah, Joe Biden is a neocon. I mean, what do you want? you played the tape, you know, the remarks that Biden has made. He's a very trustworthy pro-war neoconservative. He's just like McCain, with less of a temper, I would say.
Okay.
And more plastic surgery.
How far do you think this thing with Phil Berg is going to go? The media is not picking up on Phil Berg's story where he can prove that Barack Obama is not a citizen of the United States. Did you hear about that story?
I've heard about it. I haven't followed it. I guess I didn't follow it because I thought it probably wouldn't get very far. But sure, that's something. And you know what? It doesn't have to be proven. You know, he could come out in the end legitimately a citizen. The very fact that there's question about it, that can be in the news. If it looks like McCain's going to lose, I'm sure that this will be emphasized a little bit further. Now, of course, you've heard the same story with McCain, right?
Well, yeah, McCain was born in Panama.
Yeah, but technically, legally, Panama wasn't. It's kind of interesting how that works. But I would say that aspect, I don't know, and I haven't studied it, but I would say that aspect is really just being floated in case they need it later.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep it. Well, I mean, Phil Berg, I think he's one of Hillary Clinton's biggest supporters. I don't know if he is, but he was.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe that was a story. Maybe that was a story that they were probably about to put out there when Hillary needed it, but I guess they probably decided against it, and he decided to drive solo on that one. Let me ask you about the anti-war. Now, you saying in one of your articles, you said for the anti-war movement to succeed in the near term and to bring real peace, we need to do what we can to connect with that majority. Now, we have statistics that says 86% of the people in the United States don't agree with George Bush and his policies. But yet, we don't see a lot of that, a lot of these people actually going along with, we don't see them in the anti-war movement. Why the anti-war movement is not able to connect with the majority of people in the United States?
It is a good question. You know, I truly, I don't have a complete answer. The article that I've written was about reaching out to that, the peaceful aspect of that majority of Americans that really don't like war. But in fact, if you look at our economy, again, it comes back to the war economy. As jobs become, you know, harder to get, what's the most guaranteed job? What's the government job, and what does the government do? War support and security. These are big government, you know, munitions contracts. All these things employ people. As the economy begins to shrink a little bit, people become more scared about what's most important to them and their families. And it turns out if you have a war economy, you can actually find lots of people that will vote for war even though they proclaim not to like war. Their livelihood depends on it. So we do have a problem in this country, and I think it's an economic structuring problem. This is a thing that, you know, Eisenhower was talking about, and even Smedley Butler back after World War I was talking about, you know, this growth of a government industry, a class of industry that feeds off of government policies, particularly war. And people need their jobs. People are concerned about them. I think that's part of why. And also there's a sense that if you're willing to fight, that makes you more American. Not so much fighting, but if you're willing to fight. And so McCain capitalizes on he's not afraid to go pick a fight. He's a tough guy. I think people find that a little bit comforting, unfortunately. And, you know,
Karen, we only have a few minutes.
To the Americans, they profess to love peace, but in fact we are dependent in this country on continuing war, continuing the interference with other countries. It's a huge industry.
We only have
what will change it, of course, is when that bubble becomes unsupportable and it breaks.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes left in this first segment, but I want you to talk about something you wrote about the military-industrial complex. And you said, we say the corporate media, well, it's the military-industrial complex corporations who ensure that CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, and New York Times, and Washington Post dutifully reprint and rebroadcast the White House talking points on the goodness of this war or that. you saying that those people in the military-industrial complex, they own the media?
Well, they may not own them in terms of being the CEO of a media company, but they certainly buy these advertisements. And every person in this country who has a radio or a television set has watched a Boeing commercial. They've watched a Lockheed Martin commercial. They've listened to, even Halliburton runs commercials on the radio. Okay? Now, why would Halliburton be running commercials on radio or television? Why would Boeing be advertising the next?
Yeah, it's not like I'm going to hear the commercial and go buy an airplane.
Exactly. We're not going to hear the commercial. In fact, it is really irrelevant other than to make us feel in some way comforted that we have these companies out there. But when they buy this airtime, radio and television airtime, and print media time, these pages, full-page ads, which you can also find, this is millions and millions and millions of dollars being transferred, to their advertising, being transferred into these media corporations. Now, you're not going to get Boeing ads if right after that you're doing a story on the corruption of Boeing. You might get other ads, but you're not going to get that Boeing ad. And so if you need money, and of course media is highly competitive, lots and lots of it out there, they're struggling and competing for their niche, for their market. It's very much dog-eat-dog. They need that advertising dollar, and the deep pockets in this country have it. And they're going to hand it over. And when they do, so yes, it's who owns you? Well, whose money are you dependent on? That's the question the media must ask itself. Which is why independent media is the one you can probably trust more than anything else, because they're not taking money.
Let me ask you this. Many people have done research, and they saying that some of the same people who sit on the in board meetings and on like board of directors for these the military industrial complex, they're the same people who sit on in the media boardrooms. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on it, but everybody knows, who owns NBC or did own it. It was General Electric. Well, General Electric has a huge, set of government contracts. So, yeah, there's a blurring of those lines. Media is not about somehow keeping government honest. It's just a business, and it takes its money and really follow the money and find out who's paying for what media, and then you can make your decision on if you're getting the true story. I mean, luckily we have the internet, and we have radio shows like yours, which are available to people around the world, so we can actually find out alternative views. We're not forced to consume, big company, big government media. But in fact, the first step is to recognize that that's what you're getting spoon-fed in this country. Okay. Because that's who's buying the ads, and it's just that simple.
Very good. Karen.
It's business. It's capitalism.
Yeah.
In many ways, a really, really good thing.
Karen, it's a TV show.
What's that?
I said it's a TV show, not a radio show.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But people can see it, and it's independent, and I'm sure you're not exceptionally well-funded.
Oh, no. No, we're not funded, period. Well, listen, we are we are completely out of time in this segment. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on the program. Again, as usual, it is a pleasure having you.
Okay, and it's always good to talk to you, so thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be taking a quick break, and we will be joined with Dr. Kevin Barrett. He is one of the people who is probably found his purpose in life, which is to talk about 9/11. He is one of the 9/11 probably Truth Movement founders, and he has lost a lot, and definitely he has been extremely, persecuted. Thank you. A lot in this thing, and he's still going 100%, and he's running for Congress now. Basically, he wants people to know, he wants an investigation of 9/11, an independent investigation of 9/11. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined with Kevin Barrett. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In a couple of minutes, we will be joined with Dr. Kevin Barrett. As we told you before the break, that he is one of the first people to actually start talking about the truth of what happened on 9/11. And he was persecuted very much. He used to teach at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, and they refused his tenure. So we're not going to talk about what happened with him in that university, but we are going to talk to him about the 9/11 Truth Movement, and especially we're going to speak with him about his candidacy for the 3rd District in Wisconsin. He is running for Congress, and he's probably, if he is elected, he will call for an independent investigation for 9/11. As you know, the government investigation of the 9/11 Commission report was nothing but 10 guys sat around the table, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and agreed not to blame each other. And that's exactly what they have done. Now, before we go to Kevin, I'm going to show you just a little clip of about maybe, I don't know, maybe a minute about Kevin. And then we will, when we come back, we will show you, we will be directly speaking with Kevin Barrett. So we'll be right back.
Teaching man's best friend rarely sparks debate as heated as the type of teaching debate Kevin Barrett's been in the middle of for the past month.
The students do need to know that the clear majority of the world's Muslims believe that 9/11 was an inside job. They don't accept the official story.
The official story meaning the 9/11 Commission report, a report Barrett says is fraudulent.
To me, after having studied the facts for 2.5 years, the most probable hypothesis is that this was a new Pearl Harbor, an inside job designed by intelligence agencies and probably authorized and commanded by Vice President Cheney.
Barrett says his theories aren't conspiracies and cites scholarly sources from universities across the nation.
Clearly, the 3 buildings in New York were brought down by controlled demolitions with explosives. Yes, there were probably some kind of planes run into them to create a diversion.
My view is he's welcome to his political opinion.
UW Provost Patrick Farrell says his decision to have Barrett teach a course called Islam, Religion, and Culture is one designed to foster critical thinking.
Sometimes we sort of need controversial people to help us do that, because that helps students say, wait a minute, the world is not just like the town I grew up in.
But Farrell admits shoving all political beliefs aside probably won't happen.
A little bit of his personal views, which is sort of the crux of much of this controversy, probably will find their way in.
Something at least one student says he doesn't mind.
Part of going to colleges is seeing the other side of stories. It's not, just being in your own small little world and not taking into account other people's ideas.
I can assure you that no such brainwashing operations will take place in my class.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now joined with Kevin Barrett. Dr. Barrett, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Hesham. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Kevin, you are running for Congress. Let's talk about why someone who hates politics, and I know you do, you want to jump into it. Why you want to do that?
Well, I'm just so disgusted with what's going on right now. And since the politicians chased me out of my academic career, I'm going to try to chase some of them out of their political careers. I'm affiliated with or at least a supporter of firecongress.org, which is otherwise known as the Kick Them All Out Project. We're asking voters to retire every last incumbent in 2008. And I think I actually have a shot, a bit of a long shot, but a real shot at retiring the representative here, Ron Kind.
Okay. Do you think we will ever have an independent investigation of what happened on 9/11?
I believe that the record will be set straight one way or another.
50 years from now?
Well, no, I hope within, say, within 5 years.
Okay. And now let's talk about the 9/11 Truth Movement, which, you were there on the first day. To me, you are one of the founders of 9/11 Truth Movement. And I asked Dr. Kwiatkowski, she was with me a while ago, I said, why is it that 86% of people in the United States don't agree with the George Bush policy, but the Truth Movement has failed to reach this 86% majority. Why is that, Dr. Barrett?
Well, I think that the psychological warfare operation carried out on 9/11 was extremely successful in a sense. It was botched in many logistical respects. For instance, Building 7 obviously was not supposed to have to be brought down in an obvious controlled demolition at 5:30 p.m. But in terms of its psychological impact, it deeply and profoundly affected people, and they still are. They're shell-shocked. It's an example of what Naomi Klein calls the shock doctrine, intentionally inflicting horrific trauma on people as a form of trauma-based mind control. And it takes time for the trauma to wear off. So those of us who've managed to cut through the trauma and get to the truth and try to spread the word are facing a difficult job, but it does get easier as time passes.
Now, you're not trying to play a politician, Dr. Barrett, because if you were, you would be saying the right things, between quotations, but you are telling it as it is. And since you are telling it as it is, your platform calls for ending aid to Israel, for instance, at a time when politicians win these seats in Congress by actually competing who's more of a Zionist. And so you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot on this platform. And investigating 9/11 is not very popular with AIPAC. And so, I mean, why even bother?
Well, since every other politician in America is kissing up to the nether regions of the Zionists, begging for their money, maybe if one guy in America has the guts to stand up and tell the Zionists to stuff it, the people who are not a bunch of Zionist stooges, and there are several million such people in the United States, will perhaps choose to support my campaign, and I won't have to split the support 400 or 500 ways like the other politicians will. If people do want to support a strong anti-Zionist candidate, they should check out my website, which is barrettforcongress.us.
Okay. Now, how are you reaching people there in the 3rd District in Wisconsin? I'm sure your budget is not like one of these Republicans or Democrats. You're actually running as a Libertarian. How are you reaching the people?
Well, I'm hoping to reach them directly in various ways. The Internet is a wonderful tool, as you know. I have a couple of talk radio shows on the Internet myself, and it's great you're doing TV. I'm impressed with that. But I'm also doing some innovative strategies, such as I'm going to be placing a bunch of robocalls, automated telephone calls, to 30,000 voters. These are registered voters in my district, and it's kind of a humorous message that makes fun of annoying politicians who place robocalls. So it's entertaining, but it's also pretty hardcore and truth-telling, and it finishes with, and hey, we know that 9/11 was an inside job.
I'm sure our viewers would like to hear that. Can you play that for us?
I certainly can. I should be able to bring that up here very quickly. Okay, here we go.
Don't you just be getting automated calls from boring political candidates right before the election? I know I do. My name's Kevin Barrett, and I'm running for Congress here in Wisconsin's 3rd District. I've had it up to here with the boring, cowardly, mealy-mouthed, lying scallywags that call themselves politicians. If they call me up one more time, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Here's what I'm going to tell them. You dirty, rotten, lying, thieving jackals in Washington, D.C. wasted $5 trillion on that idiotic war in Iraq, and you destroyed our economy. 2008, nobody's going to vote for you incumbents. I'm Kevin Barrett, and me and my friends at firecongress.org are going to give you your pink slip. And oh, by the way, we know that 9/11 was an inside job. Vote for Kevin Barrett in the primary election on Tuesday, September 9th. At least he's not boring. Authorized and paid for by barrettforcongress.us. Fatna Belushi, treasurer. barrettforcongress.us. He's voting to drive again.
Okay, so that's okay. my robocall.
Yes, definitely it is funny, and it will stick in people's minds much longer and than a lot of these robocalls that we normally get. But now, I noticed one thing, that, you know, the image of a congressman is important to people, and they think a congressman should be in a $1,500 suit and serious. Do you think that image might hurt you, since you are going through it with, you know, just I am a regular guy and using comedy in these calls? Do you think that's going to hurt you, that people are not going to look at you as a serious contender?
Well, I think this year, Hesham, the people are really tired of ordinary politicians, especially the people who are swimming. These politicians are swimming in special interest money. That's where they get the money to buy their fancy suits. And, you know, this might be the year that we could get a significant movement away from this corrupt two-party system. And an insurgent candidate like me just might get lucky, sort of the way Jesse Ventura did, running for office for governor in blue jeans and T-shirts back in, when was that, 1998. Whenever Jesse got elected, that was a great upset. I hope to do the same thing. Okay.
Now, let's talk about the NITS, or NIST, actually, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They came out and said Building 7 was not an inside job. What do you think?
Well, the NIST report is a joke. They might as well wear a big sign on their forehead saying we're lying when they put that stuff out. It's just ridiculous. Prior to this report, the people trying to defend the official story at least could make up lies about how the diesel fuel in the basement somehow caused this explosive 6.5-second free fall speed collapse straight down into its own footprint. So they could blame the diesel fuel, or they could, you know, they could try to blame damage to the building caused by the collapsing towers. But now NIST has at least had the honesty to admit that this had nothing to do with diesel fuel. This had nothing to do with damage to the building. They're trying to tell us that this Building 7 came down from ordinary office fires. I mean, that's ridiculous. If that were the case, you know, I could start a demolition company, and instead of spending millions of dollars to pay experts to carefully rig up explosives in these skyscrapers to bring them down straight into their own footprint safely, not damage other buildings, I'll just go in there and light a couple of wastebasket fires and run like heck. I mean, it's an outrage, and the fact that people, you know, there are people who actually believe this nonsense really speaks poorly of the average intelligence of people who are listening to NIST.
You know, because a lot of people out there, they're saying, oh, you see, all of you conspiracy theories, you know, the whole thing about 9/11 is now it's over. You need to stop saying that somebody had something to do with it besides the fires and besides these two planes. But my problem with that report is, number one, it started 4 years after the fact, and it took them 3 years to do this. And they're saying that, number one, the team leader, he said that this never happened before in history. So this is a first-timer that a building more than 15-story highs actually fell just from fire. So he is even saying that this never happened before, but hey, it happened. But also, they are saying that they got their information from interviews with people and watching videos of what really took place. And it's like, and also, if you remember the NIST, they did say that there was no explosives in the building a few years back. So in order for them to be credible, they had to come up with this result. And if you feed the computer with the data, you know, as we all used to say in the beginning of computers, garbage in, garbage out. So they knew what the results they wanted, so they manipulated, and they definitely could have manipulated the data going into the computer. What do you think of that analysis?
Well, of course they did. You're exactly right. They built a black box model to try to produce the results that they wanted, the preordained results that were the only results that they could be allowed to present. And they came up with some completely ridiculous, tweaked black box to try to spit out this ridiculous claim that a couple of ordinary office fires can cause a 47-story building to just disappear at free fall speed straight down. It's preposterous. And, you know, since I started, doing this big time a couple of years ago, we've had hundreds of engineers and architects come out and, speak the truth, which is that the government story is preposterous. These 3 building collapses, quote unquote, were obviously controlled demolitions. And, I've been following this debate over the years, and it's gotten more and more and more clear. Besides, we have testimony from people who actually were witness to the police radio countdown. There was actually a countdown to demolition that went out over police radio, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom, it comes down. We had the BBC reporting it 20 some
before
minutes
it even went down.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how much
now,
more
let
evidence
me ask you this, Kevin. Building 6, I mean, we saw when they pulled Building 6, which was very much gone by that time. It's only an 8th-floor building, and it's much closer to the buildings than Building 7. Now, some people saying that when Silverstein said pull it, that he was referring to the same thing as they pulled Building 7, and we can see the cables that they put around Building 6 and pulled it. We can see the cables. This is a 47 or 48-story buildings, and no one saw any cables because, the people who say, oh, no, he did not mean pull it by pulling it, which is, they use that term in implosions and stuff. But he said, no, that like they did in Building 6, they did in Building 7. We didn't see, and they would not have had the time to get cables that high to put on that building. Well, what do you think?
Well, I think the people who are trying to claim that the term pull it can only mean demolition with cables are really pulling the truth so hard they're stretching it out of shape. Because, in fact, the term pull it is sometimes used in demolition for taking the building, the outside of the building inwards, pulling it inwards into itself to take it down. But besides, Larry Silverstein is not a demolitions expert. Whatever he was talking about, it obviously had nothing to do with cables. But given that Mr. Silverstein profited to the tune of so far, I believe, over $8 billion on his 6-week investment in the asbestos-ridden White Elephant World Trade Center,
right.
And given that he's now asking for another $11 billion from insurance companies, and given that he appears to have confessed to its demolition when he talked about pulling it, he's obviously a person of interest in any real 9/11 investigation.
Right. Dr. Barrett, hold on for a second. We're going to go to the phones. We didn't want to get a lot of calls because I wanted to have more time with you, but let's catch at least one before we go. Let's go to Freedom on line 1. Freedom?
Yes, I would like to ask Dr. Barrett a question about the NIST so-called study. Dr. Barrett, does any of the scientists who work for that organization have any integrity at all? Can't y'all get some of them to come out and say that there's no way that a reinforced steel structured building like
Building 7
was could possibly melt with just small fires inside of the building? The steel melts at about 2,800 degrees. So what type of fire would it have to have been in the building to melt that steel for the infrastructure just to crumble? Please explain that to me, Doc.
Thanks.
Well, that's a really good point. There was all sorts of evidence for molten steel. In fact, there's evidence that a bunch of the steel from the foundation, rather from the structure of Building 7, was actually evaporated, which requires ultra-high temperatures. And, of course, they've never adequately explained that. So the question is, why won't any of the NIST scientists admit the obvious? And I think the answer is partly that this whole investigation is being run by the suspects in the crime itself. Kevin Ryan, who's the Underwriters Labs whistleblower who was fired after protesting the cover-up of the demolition of the World Trade Center, has discovered that the key people in the NIST investigation have connections to extremely advanced military research in superthermate, that is nanothermate and related compounds. So this is exactly the technology that appears to have been used to conduct these extremely advanced demolitions with a military demolitions team. And the very people who developed the substances that were used in this demolition were then placed in the key positions to do the NIST cover-up. We have the foxes guarding the henhouse here.
Now, Dr. Barrett, you will be on Monday, you will be with Dr. Stephen Jones in an interview with Alex Jones, I believe. Now, did Dr. Stephen Jones, didn't he have the actual specimen from those buildings, and he did do the studies on it and actually did find traces of thermite in there, to your knowledge?
Oh, yes. He's found abundant evidence for the use of thermate. Specifically, it looks like a highly advanced nanothermate. In fact, just as the anthrax was weaponized, ultra-advanced weaponized anthrax that could only have been produced by one particular lab that's run with the CIA, likewise, the type of thermate here was, is traced to the high-tech military research in thermate. And Dr. Jones has found things like iron-rich microspheres, which are these perfect little balls that could only have been formed when steel is melted and then flung through the air, producing these little tiny pieces that turn into perfect spheres. That's one of the many pieces of chemical evidence he's found supporting.
And thermate is what? If you could explain that to our viewers.
Thermate is ordinary thermite is a substance that's it's aluminum and sulfur, I believe, that's ground up and mixed together as sort of a powder, and it can cut through steel, kind of burns through steel. You can actually watch it on YouTube burning through an automobile engine. So it slices through steel, even in just its ordinary form. But it can be made much more powerful and into an explosive substance by manipulating it at the molecular level. And so this so-called nanothermate is thermate with nanotechnology applied to it to make it that much more powerful and explosive. And that does appear to have been used in the demolition of the World Trade Center.
Okay. Very good. With the last couple of minutes that we have left, have you been watching the circus in Denver?
A little bit, yeah. I saw Alex Jones and the We Are Change people marching through the streets and, getting in the faces of some of those, mainstream media jackals like Chris Matthews. Yeah, it was great. I love to watch that.
Well, I think Barack will be speaking shortly. We can imagine. What do you think? How could Hillary Clinton go from hating his guts? I mean, do they really think the American people are that stupid when they go from, they hate this guy, but watching them speak, I understand politics and uniting, but you're fake. When you're not showing your emotions, I'm sure Hillary and her husband, President Bill Clinton, were not too happy just to be speaking at this conference. I don't know how much, if they got paid, I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But isn't that fake human beings?
Oh, yeah. These ordinary mainstream media covered politicians from the two-party monopoly are just the most plastic, phony, lame excuses for alleged human beings that you could ever come across. My own opponent here in Wisconsin, Ron Kind, is also a pretty phony, slick kind of guy. His blow dry looks like it's frozen on his head, and his wife looks like Barbie, and he's been in D.C. for 12 years, and he likes it. And he keeps just muttering these mealy-mouthed little lies. It's really pathetic the way politicians behave in America today. And I'll tell you, one thing about my campaign is that it's not slick and phony. It is a campaign for peace and truth. People can find out about it again at barrettforcongress.us.
Very good. Very good. Well, Dr. Barrett, just have time to thank you for coming on the program. It's always a pleasure having you on. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hesham. It's always great to talk with you. Keep up the great work.
Thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I really wanted to talk a lot and more about the convention, but I think you also have brains, and you can see, it's a media frenzy, and I think, they paid a lot of money to get that. But I think the only one that was showing a little bit of feelings was Michelle Obama towards Hillary Clinton. You can tell that she's not really, she doesn't like her too much. But and I'm glad probably that would be better, because being a vice president and first lady doesn't like you, I don't think that will be good. But anyhow, if we get a chance next week, we will speak about the convention and about politics. But I would rather talk to people like the guests that we had with real information, because they are real people, not fake and trying to kind of play you stupid. Anyhow, be careful. The hurricane is coming, so good night.
The views and opinions expressed in the previous program are strictly those of the segment producer and do not reflect the views of Acadiana Open Channel, its staff, board of directors, the City of Lafayette, or Cox Communications.
If you can't get you to break all of the 10 Commandments, we'll go around the back